It's really wonderful to be here. There's all wonderful sessions of people here, but I'm really excited to be the three people who we've been working with over pretty much the last year. The nature of a global project like JournalismAI project is you rarely get to be in the same room where you can take content very often. So it's fantastic to share a space with you. Just to very quickly explain, the JournalismAI project that I'm the leader of has been at the LSE since 2018. We started back then doing research onto AI, and since then we've built loads of resources, loads of training and education resources in loads of different languages. And perhaps most excitingly, we spent a lot of time working with news organizations around the world, experimenting with AI tools and systems in lots of different use cases. So with the Innovation Challenge, which is funded by the Google News Initiative, with the Innovation Challenge, we've got 35 different news organizations, and they're all smaller news organizations, and they're all from the so-called Global South. And they've been innovating on a whole range of things, including countryless information, finding new formats using AI, and also on revenue raising and sustainability. And they're all coming to the end of their work with us, and we'll be publishing the results in the next month, partly as one of our festival, which we have in London next month. So really good to have Jazmín, Doya, and Wale with me today. And I'm going to do it in reverse order, starting with Wale. I'm just going to ask you to just explain what you've been doing with this, the case study that you've been doing with the Innovation Challenge this year.
It's funny, his work. And thank you so much. Right? Thanks everyone for being here. And so over the last year, right, we've been really working to solve what we've called an indigenous language problem that we say that India has, which is around just increasing access for the availability of content developed in indigenous African languages. We know that over 1 billion Africans speak at least one indigenous language, but Swahili, which is the most popular or widely spoken language of the continent, barely reaches or barely covers 1% of the internet. And as we all know or should know, around 50% of the internet or digital content is in English. And what does that actually mean for news audiences or audiences that are within Africa trying to access the news, particularly our kinds of journalism, which is really about raising consciousness of citizens and just making them understand more about policies, policymakers, and how it affects their lives. And it means, especially when it comes to this era of misinformation, disinformation, it means finding the opportunity to really allow these audiences to be a part of the news creation process or to be a part of the news consumption process, especially as concerns digital news. Why do we choose audio? We chose audio to focus on because radio is still a big part of the media diets of people on the continent, particularly in Nigeria. But radio has struggled to make that digital transition. Again, for multiple reasons. The tool that we've been building to address what we now call this language gap is called Minin. It's a AI-powered text-to-speech platform that allows anyone, anywhere to clone their own voice, to train our model in their language. It also gives them access to languages that we've already pre-built into the model, including Swahili, Hausa, and Pidgin, which is the variant of English that's spoken across West Africa. And we think that this is the beginnings of what we hope is a process by which we make journalism just more accessible, but also just include this vast audience that we think has been let out of that digital transition. And it has many use cases, ranging from just how we disseminate news or disseminate information into these underserved communities, but also how we reach even visually impaired audiences. We have 25 million people in Nigeria who are registered as having visual impairments. And I think Beckett exists also to help us start to think about formats in which we could deliver our stories to those audiences. And we've been building that, I think, over the last 9 months or so.
Is it going to work?
That is a very good question. It is working. You presented a demo, I think, about a month ago, and we're excited by what we're seeing. I think what we've now spent the last couple of weeks or the last couple of months really doing is refining the language, refining the accents. I think for me, why this is such an exciting project is we're coming from a time where early on, when our readers were demanding audio as a way of just engaging further with our content, and the available options that we were using, an example being a really fantastic tool like 11 Labs, didn't really have African accents, didn't really have African languages. And so we've now reached a point where back then the challenge was, what is it going to sound like to fit Nigerian content in an American accent? It was a bit of a disconnect there. So now we do have a replacement for that, or an alternative for that. I will admit it's still very jerky, one thing that we're still trying to figure out is why, for example, our AI model doesn't pick the first and last words in a sentence. It just decides notes. And so we've been, working on that. And I think for us, this is a very exciting solution. The other thing that we've also been working on is how to just ensure that this is ethical. I think the beauty about journalism AI is really starting to bring journalistic ethics into an area that we really needs ethics, which is just AI in general. I think the big criticism that AI, big tech that's had around AI is the lack of ethics and just how much of these AI tools or LLMs have been rolled out. And I think why it's so important to have journalists in the room is because the very foundation of our industry is ethics. And one of the ways that we've been looking at that is, for example, is a really, really great question that we got when we did the demo, which is how are you going to ensure that this doesn't encourage things like fraud? So if you can clone someone's voice, if you can clone somebody else's voice, how are you going to make sure that people are not just using, Obama's phones to contact people? But I think it's also really interesting because there are now ways in which we can use AI technologies to actually scrape the internet, and there are tools that already exist to do that, and to scrape the internet to ensure that any voice that's known to be a celebrity voice can immediately be flagged. So there's issues like that we're already addressing. And there's also issues that are just, I guess, more related to digital platforms in general, which is just how we have user verification during the login process or during the onboarding process that ensures that people have to register with their passports or any form of just government approved ID to just make sure that there is a traceable point that authorities can have if such a situation does happen. And so these are some of the things that we're seeing to the areas in which we still kind of need to make sure are at the forefront of what.
It's not just about the tech, is it? And I think it's really fascinating. We talk about minority languages like pidgin, and yet this is millions and millions of people who aren't being served properly. So it's really exciting. Duya, the core of the work of Nest is kind of fact checking. What were you building with the Innovation Challenge?
So I run an organization called Nest Center for Journalism Innovation Development, which is a 5-year-old NGO. I kind of transitioned from being a journalist to a data support organization. There were two things that we wanted to solve in establishing our organization. First of all, we believe that we can support livelihoods through good information. So in doing so, we have to create more good journalism. And the second thing was we had to have more people reading more good journalism. So really the combination of our work in the past, including the fact-checking and also our project, was a platform called Pluma.media. This is a user-generated platform that's supposed to, that we hope will kind of rise through the censorship of businesses and politicians in Mongolia. And we used AI to help us serve audiences of Pluma better. So Pluma is still in its very early stage, and we developed two AI tools through the JournalismAI project. The first one being a sentiment analysis tool. So basically it is embedded onto our platform. What it does is as soon as a new content is published on Pluma, it basically scans through the content and says whether it's positive, negative, or neutral. It not only does that because if you're already reading the story, you already know that, right? You don't need AI to tell you that. What it's also doing is it's sifting through 7 other prestigious newsrooms, finding and identifying the same story, and it's giving you the results whether majority of the media outlets are reporting on it from a negative, positive, or neutral standpoint. So it makes helps readers to make their decision about certain issues, whether it's the budget or protests or whatever that is easier to make. And we're not competing with the other media organizations. So Wale mentioned about ethics, and one of the things that we held very importantly was we wanted to support the ecosystem in doing that. So readers are able to go into the stories that talk about the same content on those other platforms. So we're also driving traffic through the Puma platform to the other websites as well. So that's one of the things. And we've already done a few focus group discussions between our users. And one of the use cases that we didn't anticipate was if a reader didn't want to read anything negative, the tool helped them to decide not to read that content. So it's kind of counterintuitive as well, and it was so unexpected on our end. But then I was thinking about it a lot, like, what do we do about it? Like, are we making people not read stories anymore? But then we could use this kind of knowledge to talk with our journalists who are providing content on the Puma platform. And if people don't want negative stories, I mean, that's all the reason of the fatigue that we're facing. So we could probably have a solution with the journalists to address that issue together. So that's, in a way, helping us understand our audience better. The second tool is an AI-assisted fact-checking tool. So the need for this tool came from the fact that the Meta company announced that is ending its third-party fact-checking program, starting from the United States. We still don't know what's going to happen in Mongolia, but our fact-checking center is Meta's third-party fact-checking partner. And if I'm being completely honest, our organization benefited a lot. The readers in Mongolia benefited a lot using the fact-checking tool that Meta provides to the customers. It's much more easier for us to identify disinformation based on how harmful it is. And with the expectation that that could go away anytime, we developed a tool that would help us identify disinformation faster and more accurately. So based on 1,400 fact checks that we had done in our first 5 years of operation, we identified 5 key characteristics of disinformation. And we trained the tool to basically scan through all the information that's coming through to Puma Media and show the fact checkers first whether there's a probability that a certain piece of information could be compromised. So at that point, it's only being shown to the fact checkers, and the fact checkers, depending on the percentage point of the probability, they will choose to fact check that certain information. And as the information is fact checked, it's directly labeled on the content that is on Pima. If there's a probability of over 60% of that story being compromised, that it's directly shown to the reader, but we're not showing percentage points. We're basically saying this article includes lack of sources or doesn't have enough sources. It uses words in the Mongolian language that basically refer to any assumptions and things like that, or the journalist who has published this story has been read multiple times before and things like that. So basically, we're advising readers to approach the story with caution. Another unexpected story, if I have time, an unexpected result that we had was there was this other tool that was being developed in Mongolia called Jazmín. So they developed this tool that's called the Reader Assistant. So what it does is it also goes through the story, and as you finish reading that story, it offers you 3 questions to continue to read on that topic. And it's fed with sources from the journalism industry, not just the open internet. So basically, it elongates the time spent on a certain story by 3 times. So we decided to collaborate with them as well, and we embedded the widget on our platform as well. And all 3 of them are working now. The sentiment analysis tool is way better in terms of operation. The JournalismAI is 100% working. The only thing that's still in the works is the fact-checking part. This is where we're at.
Fantastic, really submitting. And I got some other questions to you. I'll come back to that. Jazmín, you do work with mesh channels also related to the lyrics.
Yes, it is related to Examfish. Large language models are native languages. Just for a bit of context, Paraguay is a bilingual country, but there's a big power imbalance between Spanish and Guarani, which is the native language. And of course, Guarani is underrepresented in digital tools, also because it's an oral language. Like half of over half of world languages are not in written form. So this gap is growing with AI chatbots, which leads millions of people, and not only in Paraguay, but also in Argentina, Bolivia, excluded from digital tools. So what we tried to do with our project was basically tap on the power of our audience, that our communities, to improve poverty data sets so that AI can understand what I need. So I'm going to describe a little bit how we did it. We organized community hackathons to collect Guarani voices for Mozilla's common voice datasets. We also train local facilitators to host these community hackathons, and they already hosted more than 10 events across the country, and they managed to gather more than 100 people that have already contributed and improve recognition by about 10%. And there we fine-tune AI models with deep voices. For instance, we integrated the models into a chatbot that we developed for Surti. And now our audience can interact in what I need with the chatbot. That's basically what we did. So right now we have an MVP, is a chatbot that manages our subscription program. And the chatbot is now starting to understand what I need, which is good because then we can have more what I need subscribers. And it works by asking people to send short audio phrases that it transcribes them and ask for feedback for improvement. I guess the biggest lesson of this project was that teaching AI and oral language is not really a technical challenge, it's more a social challenge. That's much bigger. That's all we learned. Building language for tech, for us, it has meant building community. Because contributing to a data set can be very slow and extractive. So we tap on the power of community to do that. So that's what I think has been the biggest takeaway of this project. Also, we learned that diversity is key. You need to have diverse accents, ages. So we train our local facilitators to manage convenes with people from different backgrounds, definitely. So yeah, that has been some of the biggest takeaways of this project, definitely.
Thanks very much. Now, I'm hoping that people here are thinking, gosh, that is amazing work from all three of you. Surely this should be replicable. Surely other people should be doing something like this.
Obviously, this is still part of the Innovation Challenge, and you could support you to some degree.
99% of the work's been done by yourselves. Is it replicable?
No, because especially your one sounded so sophisticated. Sentiment analysis is like a holy grail in terms of and yet you're seen to be getting something real and tangible answers. So all three do quickly. Can other people do something similar?
Yeah, I absolutely think so. At least on our side. I think the biggest challenge that we've had with working with indigenous languages, that I'll just use as a disclaimer, is the fact that there's very limited resources available to train AI models on, because you still need text data, which is why I think the approach that Surti took was just really fascinating. And I think if we had known that, we had thought about something like that, I think it would have definitely made our work a lot easier. But I think just generally, it is replicable, because I think the beauty of this challenge is that it is in many ways a global challenge at the end of the day. That whether it's not indigenous language or whether it's thinking about how we can just improve the way that audio works, I think that there's room to really think about the ways in which an AI can intervene. I think the broader thing that I think makes us excited about the work that we're doing isn't just necessarily the ability for your users to, let's say, embed tap into our API and use that to convert their own content into an audio, but it's this kind of new wave of what we're calling voice creators that you can potentially create. I think for us, what we're looking at is not just stopping at converting text to speech, but seeing how people can also even monetize those voices. And I think the reason I think it's replicable is that all of this already exists. It's just now bringing it, I think, into the era of voice. We have images being licensed, we have text being licensed, and we even have royalty-free sounds. And so the infrastructure is already there. I just think that AI can allow us to do this at a much more accelerated pace. And I think that we all get to the destination even faster when there's more of us doing this type of work, because it gives us resources that each of us can then tap into. So I absolutely think that it's replicable, and I think that we all stand to gain if all of us are actually pulling resources, or at least trying to see how we can kind of solve and tackle this problem.
Same question to you.
Yeah, it is replicable, and I hope it is replicated. So when we developed the sentiment analysis tool, our approach was, the language of Mongolia is spoken by 3 million people. So it's a very low resource language. All the contents that are on the internet that is in Mongolian language is not enough for us to develop a very good model. So the approach that we used was there is more than 400 media organizations in Mongolia. Out of that, 150-ish is digital media organizations, and we have filtered through all those organizations on the quality of the journalism that they produce, and we filtered out about 30 websites. The reason we have now 7 organizations that are part of us is we kind of went the longer way, and we're signing memorandum of understanding at each of them for them to share their content with us and to be used to train and improve the AI model. So that's a very long process, and our IT people were very much against that because they were saying they have the means to just access the websites and scrape their data. Like, why are you causing us to delay, right? But we wanted this to be a very fair kind of relationship, and what we kind of told the organizations that are partnering with us to develop this model is it's going to be owned by all of us in Mongolia, and the intention for us is basically to use these models on other low resource languages. And it's kind of a dream. At this point, it's not really a purpose yet, but our dream is to introduce this platform, Pluma, all of it, to Central Asian countries. We do have some history of working in the Central Asian journalism market, and it's a much more challenging environment than we have in Mongolia, although we do have our own challenges, but it's like our future for us. So that's the intention that we had kind of thought of at every stage of our operation. But the weakest thing about AI, I think, is the fact that people use it. People have to be willing to use it. People have to be willing to embed it on their platforms or wherever that is. And I think that's the weakest point that results in losing time, delays, and things like that. So from the technology perspective and our willingness perspective, it's completely replicable.
Same question to you on replicability, but also pick up on just what you just mentioned there about how you bring the team with you as well.
Yeah. Yes, our project is definitely replicable, and actually we just published our technical guides and our community guides for other BS rooms that want to run the kind of community hackathons out that we hosted and help us improve our representation of an AI language in data sets. That's replicable, but I definitely believe that it's very we shouldn't, like a newsroom like ours, so small, cannot deliver on the promise of fair representation of a native language. What we have done is show that it can be done, but this requires national level of support. In India, you have the state doing it, you have the government doing it, so that's sort of the level of efforts that you actually need to talk about fair representation. What we can do is show that this, again, it can be done. And I think it's a great opportunity to reach out to audiences that don't speak official languages or are not represented in digital tools. It has helped us, but yes, as a interpreter to an extent.
And I love the way all of you, one of the biggest learnings I've had from doing this project is around AI technologies and this emerging new ecosystem. Collaboration and connection and networking is so key, isn't it? It's not a question of heroically going forward on your own. It's looking to work with other people, networking within the team to start, making sure that everyone's on board, but then thinking about the other pillars. And I love the way that you've been working with the other media organizations to actually enhance everybody's position. It's fantastic. In a minute, coming to questions from the audience, just one last, if you like, more detailed, but also perhaps broader question, which is, for today and going forward, how much is AI actually part of the real everyday work of you and your colleagues in your organizations? And just in a flavor of where you think this is going, what's your kind of hopes and fears about this technology?
So I'll say really quickly, so we are very open about AI at our own organization, and what we kind of use it for is more or less as a productivity tool. We've developed a kind of ethical guide around AI that we use on our team, which basically kind of helps everybody understand that AI there doesn't necessarily replace people, and it's to actually just accelerate the work that we do and make it just more efficient. And also just make us more productive. So it's a productivity tool at our organization as opposed to a creativity tool. And a good example of that is we will not use AI generated images, for example. We kind of just draw a line there. Because we have a community of illustrators and photographers that we work with. Well, we might use it, for example, to generate summaries of insights. So just going through a document much faster to generate a report later on. And in terms of just what I think, when I think about hopes and fears about AI, I think that oftentimes the media is probably focused on, there's an area that's a big, and I'd say elephant in the room that I think we are all overlooking, especially from my side of the wall, which is, Global South. And when we look at the headlines and we see something like, OpenAI in quotes with the New York Times, what that registers to us is that, look, we don't have the New York Times' budget to go up against a big tech company. And so we need to be thinking about, I guess, more strategically around intellectual property. And I think that's a conversation that isn't necessarily coming up enough, I think, in the media spaces. We talk a lot about disinformation, which are all very important, but I think we should also be spending a lot more time talking about the people that are actually creating these works that large language models are scripting, and how we can ensure that this is being done in ways that protect their intellectual property, but also in ways that are ethical. And so on our own side, what that looks like is licensing, and how the industry can really start to think more proactively around just licensing and creating licenses and that companies can use to then, ethically produce AI tools that will then be built off of, the intellectual property of others. It was so great, I think what that conversation that you had within your team around, why are we working with newsrooms when we could just scrape the internet? But the thing is, tech companies don't have those journalistic ethics, and I think that for us, again, it's not a solution that one company can have. And it's a solution that we had to start really thinking about as an industry, as, working with the states, working with governments to see how, particularly in areas where media companies are very small and fragmented, we can kind of create this sort of collective solution. I think that that's what really excites me about where we're going with AI. It's not really necessarily that a company is out there that's to be able to steal all of our information, but that it's creating this necessity for us to come together and really think about how we protect the labor of our journalists, of our creators, who, and how we can translate that protection into probably even additional income for them as well on like a royalty basis. So I think that's where I don't really see it as kind of folks against it, but I think there's a really big opportunity.
Hope your fair's stupid, Byron. But yeah, you're much more sophisticated than that. Thank you.
For us, we have a very simple way of approaching AI within our organization. So basically, the gist of it is we promote the use of AI, but everybody has to know that you're using AI in your workflow. And AI should never be used to create a final product, and humans or people should be at the end. Human review should be at the end of every AI use and will be responsible for the output. So that's basically the gist of our AI policy within our organization. And the way we approach it is, nothing's going unchecked from our use of AI within our organization. But the gist of it is, you might have heard about the fact that when humanity created fire, we had a second set of stomach. And then AI is our second set of brain. And I think that's pretty accurate because it's just brain. We humans don't only depend on our brains to make decisions. We have gut feelings, we have heart, we have empathy, we have creativity. So those things cannot be replaced. So that's where humans come in. That's where we come in, where our team comes in. And basically that's our approach to using AI, and we know it's not going to completely replace us, but humanity kind of depends increasingly on just their brain or logics to make a lot of decisions. And if we keep on going like that, then there is a risk that it could probably be better or smarter than us, but it's never going to be more human than us. And I think that's very important. It's however kind of intangible it sounds. I think that's the most important thing for journalists to think about when we're approaching AI, because our readers, our audiences, they are hungry for more human interactions, more they're hungry to be understood by us. And if we're thinking AI is getting better than us and we're trying to compete with AI and increasingly relying on just our brains, then we're probably going to lose this.
Yeah. Yes. Are you seeing any kind of, clear productivity or perhaps gains from AI?
Yes. On my news outlet, then has been almost organic integration. It's speeding up internal processes like transcription of audio interviews, translations, grammar correction, that kind of thing. But we're not using AI. That's the line of the door. We're not using AI to actually publish or produce something. In fact, I think AI is helping us sort of refocus on purpose. I think 2 or 3 years ago, I was also here in Vienna on a panel to present how my news outlet managed successfully to capture the attention of audiences on social media with artificial journalism. But we definitely started to hit a ball with that approach because it heightens the dependency to third-party platforms first, and it puts, again, content at the center of all of our efforts. That's all we're thinking about. Even though we were already good at connecting with audiences, but still we're thinking about the content. So with AI, the wall has become a fortress, and so we have to start looking in a different direction. And that direction for us is raising our mission, which is to connect people around information. So that means right now for us, rebuilding direct communication channels with them and engaging with them more directly. So for instance, this year, we started to host more in-person events, and they have been really good. People are saturated with information. There's too much information out there. And the digital experience for people has become very heavy. So when you offer them a chance to just meet up, in person, they come, they show up, and they have a really good time. And you can even see that the trust increases, and then you also earn more subscribers because they get to see you, they get to meet you, and they hack you. Then we also launch a print subscription, which is a titanic project at this moment. But we think that there will be renewed value in that, in those kind of more tangible experiences. So AI is helping us in that way as well.
It's kind of a paradox.
Yeah.
Kind of paradox that all three of you work for, let's be honest, relatively small organizations. And yeah, you're using this tech in a way that seems to be creating more space for you to do more kind of real stuff. Is that how you just could?
It is a better. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's go to some questions for your ears, please. Would anybody like to ask any more about these products? We've got one question there. Do you want to wait for a microphone? Good microphones for the speak further questions? Right down from there, Tris. No, so I'd be the submitter.
Thank you very much for very inciting and exciting session. I have a few questions I'd wanted for the panelists. First, to the Indigenous Language Challenge. I think that we should begin to get into having more native speaker linguists on the team. Since the work in Nigeria, I wanted to find out if you know about NILAM, Nigeria Institute for Languages, and you can collaborate with linguistics departments of universities. And you look at the use of pidgin, which spreads across West Africa. I'm wondering the variety of pidgin English that we're using. I don't know if you have read the book by Mark Spencer, English in West Africa, where you already have some varieties of pidgin creolizing. In Nigeria, you'll be talking as a Warri and Port Harcourt and what have you. You can have further discussion on that. For Mongolia, I wanted to find a very good thing about sentiment analysis too, but I'd like to find out how you balance audience bias, because the sentiment analysis tool is actually going to pick up from comments on the internet. Given the fact that many people, particularly influencers and some audiences, they represent interest, how would you balance the kind of sentiment analysis that comes out from that? Do you have a form of validation process, engaging experts to look at some of those things and interpret them in context? I felt that would be more ethical. I would actually give the perspective of everybody. I'm happy that these are replicable. And for our colleague from Hungary that talks about teaching AI the oral language, I also think that if you look at native speaker linguists, it could help you to get the variety that is actually authoritative for the various local languages. Overall, well done to all the panelists. Thank you very much.
Do you mind just AB Parks? You're also an expert. Who are you? Sorry, just your name.
Okay, my name is Abigail Oboizendisika. I'm a professor from the University of Lagos, Nigeria. I teach communication and journalism.
That explains it. Jonah, three great questions. Jonah, quick get through them, please.
Yes, absolutely. So you asked about how we engaged linguists, but also how we talk about pidgin. And those are some really great questions. And I think it's really interesting that you asked about linguists, because I would say that that's really what we're doing now. I think with a project like this, we had to be really, really, I'd say, realistic as to what we could achieve within the timelines. And I think our major focus was to even just develop this MVP, to just see whether it worked. But along the way, we organized focus group sessions. So in those focus group sessions, we invited linguists, language consultants as well were present, and they gave us what I'd call just like the early feedback that could guide the production of a tool that would be just demo ready. And now what we're doing is going back and saying, okay, how can this be improved? I think the beauty of AI is also kind of like, the challenge I'd say with it, which is, we've been able to develop this thing that when I listen to it, I know that, okay, this still needs a bit of like tweaking to sound And I imagine that it's something that, but also that's, so then way back to the beauty of it, the beauty of AI is that it learns. So the more it's used, the more feedback it receives, the more tweaking it gets, and the more, I'd say, users that it's exposed to, the more it's going to be refined. And so that's the part with and linguists. The second part about pidgin, we had to stick with Nigerian pidgin. And I think for us, when we were structuring the project, we focused on 4 main languages. We focused on Nigerian pidgin, we focused on Hausa, we focused on Swahili as well. And I think it was very important to us that, sorry, 3 main languages. And I think it was very important to us to focus on Nigerian pidgin because, again, that's a language that was immediately accessible to us. But I think you ask a very important question, which is, how are we going to, and sorry, yes, the actual 4th language was English with a Nigerian accent. And so you ask a very important question, which is, which touches on several things, being number 1, how are we going to expand the language database? Or how are we thinking about that? I think, again, it's not something, I think going into this project, we realized that it's not something that one company can sort out. And so our approach to this was to build an MDK that could eventually host decentralized, language training. And what we call that is where you now have the individual users themselves training the model themselves. And so you go into the model, you train it so that it can give you back content that's in your own voice or in your own accent or in your own language. And then the languages that we developed are more or less in-house languages. And so the idea is that over time, when we then expose these users to the feature that allows them to monetize those voices will then become more publicly available. And that way, we think can be faster to be able to get all of these different variations compared to if we were to try and do every single voice model ourselves. This is nothing new. It's the same approach that, several decentralized platforms had taken, platforms like on Splash, which does that, the images. They can host 1 billion images, but they don't own all those images. It's user generated. And so I think we're envisioning an approach like that in the future.
Great.
Thank you for the question. That was very valuable and valid point for us, and you've spotted one of our weaknesses. So right now, we have decided to basically postpone thinking about comments. The reason being, we're seeing increasingly more coordinated comments coming to websites as opposed to social media. I mean, currently social media is a much more hostile environment than websites, but that's increasingly coming into websites. So right now what our tool is doing is it's only analyzing the main body of the text of the article. It's also not looking into the photo that's accompanying the article, and if there is a video that's coming with the article, it's also not looking at that. So those are probably phase 2 of our development. And we're not sure if we want to bring in comments yet. I mean, we're still learning and studying, but because of those coordinated attempts under especially political content, we don't believe that we will get accurate sentiment of humans from comments yet. So that's still under discussion within our team. Yeah, thank you for the question.
I don't think there was a question for me. There was a suggestion, which I agree. I agree with us.
Any more questions out there? Somebody must have a question. Go.
We will not give a training now to ask a question. But
I know they're way ahead of us, aren't they? Yeah. Please.
And Siwa from the Contrary newspaper, we had intense discussions about AI, as so many of them are in the US to China. And I wonder, you've had experience of people in your team refusing to use AI, issuing back from me, and how you deal with that kind of conversation.
So we also work with a number of newsrooms. We help them establish a sustainable business model. And in doing so, we're currently actively working with 6 different newsrooms, and we've done a number of trainings and workshops for them on using AI ethically, and also some of the opportunities that newsrooms can benefit from. And there's this newspaper, daily newspaper, that really just outright refuses to even try to understand what AI is. And yeah, basically it's a reality that we don't have a choice. And journalism industry made a mistake probably when the internet was created and with social media of being like ignorant about the technology that was coming in. And this has only brought us into this time where we're really struggling. And I personally don't think you can make the same mistake again with the coming of AI, and now 2025 we're also talking about agentic AI, where we're not really understanding fully the assistive approaches as well. So, I mean, there are, but we continue to advocate, but not just like, I mean, in our conversations we're generalizing things a lot. Like either AI is evil or AI is God. It's in between, and we're trying to understand what the risks may be, what the opportunities may be, and how we use it ethically.
We haven't really had those kind of discussions, Sipo, in my newsroom. But there's definitely not kind of a critical adoption of AI in the newsroom, because we do have a very strong coverage of what the deployment of AI means to our country. Now we have data centers everywhere that are disrupting water and energy sources, and that's affecting communities across the country, and not only in Paraguay, all over Latin America. So we do that kind of coverage. So we're not like it's not that we're adopting these AI tools without knowing that there is an impact ongoing that needs more reflection and discussion, and yeah, but we haven't really had that discussion. But I do know that my reporters and our editors, they're sort of like, okay, we're gonna use this stuff, but yeah, they don't rely, definitely with them, they don't rely fully on them. Yeah.
So it's interesting you asked that question, because we had some pushback, and very early on when we started to think about, AI and just, how we could use it, or just even when we were covering it, and it's I think conversations like that that inspired our focus on AI and editorially, but also even operationally. So we release 4 crane magazines a year. The current magazine that we release is all about AI and African perspectives on AI. And I think for a publication that is progressive in Nigeria, covering critical issues, and who has been reporting on how, African labor is used to clean up AI data sets, it's exploitative, all of those things, it can easily seem counterintuitive to be using these tools. But I think the conversations that we've had helped us to really map out, okay, but how can we actually use this tool? And one of the things that came out of those conversations was that, for example, we will never use it for images. So it's not something that we're going to use to develop illustrations, which, our audience knows us for, and, values the work that we do for. It's also, even in our, we work a lot with freelancers, but it's also made us hyper conscious and using, verification tools to make sure that reports aren't being written with AI. I think for us, it helped us to just really mark out the fact that we could use it as a productivity tool, but we don't use it as an editorial tool. So it actually doesn't come into the editorial space. It's more of admin, I'd say, but also increasingly revenue generation, right? Because one of the big things that we're often thinking about in our usual is, how can we make what we do financially sustainable? How can we make sure that, okay, if we looked at these AI companies or big tech and we said they're exploiting intellectual property, how could we split that conversation into, paying for the rights to use those and that information? And that came about because we realized that whether we like it or not, our data has been scraped. You go on Google, nowadays, or you go on, and the summary is already there. You go on ChatGPT and you type in your information is already there. It's already in scraped. And so for us, it's really thinking about, okay, this is the issue. Maybe not thinking about it as a kind of monster in the room, but approaching it with curiosity and just thinking about, okay, but how could we translate this into something that is more ethical and more financially sustainable? And I think once we kind of reframed it that way in Unusual, it then became, okay, there's a way that we can approach this that doesn't, involve us setting out in that kind of way. But I think it's a very, very important thing to have and to nurture. We need to push back. We need people holding us accountable. And even within our own newsroom, and it's definitely something that we encourage.
Could I just add? There was this recent MIT study that compared, it had a number of people write essays, one having them use ChatGPT and others using general Google search. And it found, it's not been peer reviewed yet, but it is a valid study. So what it found was continued use of generative AI resulted in the brain capacity deteriorating. So people eventually became just machines that were copying what ChatGPT was giving them. So when we're saying that artificial intelligence can be used in a smart and creative way, we also should have that in mind. Like, what kind of impact is it having on its users? So we're talking about now the creative side, right? The creator side, like, well, how are newsrooms using it? So if we're using artificial intelligence to create synthetic images or synthetic videos, I haven't found a single study on this. Like, does that make, like, seeing synthetic contents that are created by artificial intelligence as part of the visualization of a news story, does that impact humans' ability to make critical decisions when they are exposed to synthetic disinformation later on? Do they have a tendency to treat it as valid information? I haven't found a single study on that, and I've been asking this question from a lot of people, and I haven't found the answer to that. So these are all open questions that we have. At the same time, we are approaching AI in a cautiously optimistic way.
To coin phrase, yeah, you're right. I'm trying to write a book about this at the moment. I haven't found that bit of research. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I haven't found that bit of research. What I see is unpublished research which shows that people, when it matters, people are much better than we think at spotting AI imagery compared to real imagery when it matters. Any other questions? So now you want to ask questions. Now, Eric's go on there.
I mean, just the piece of research, which I think all three panelists might benefit from, is a recent piece of research with 22 public broadcasters across Europe. So BRT, BBC contributed, and also sort of done under the aegis of the EU, is that 45% of the time, news stories are misrepresented using AI. And I know I've really heartened. I mean, getting the indigenous language reach is so important. But it's just, as Wale said, watching the editorial, because what wasn't clear from the presentation, and we're not got time now, is the news organisation, the journalists that you're reading, because that's the critical bit behind it. And I'll happily pass on a link to that research.
And I would pass on a link to the critique of that research by the wonderful Felix Simon, who does a very interesting critique of the methodology of the research, which I think does severely undermine his value. And also he's wrong, but its usability, or it's the sense that it can make from its conclusions, and not what BBC thinks. Yeah. Say that, Fran, or something, please.
You mentioned, thank you very much first for the discussion. You mentioned cloning of voices, and you all know that the radio is the cards of the work in the radio, and it's how we are taking it, how we take our audience at hand and show the reality. So, do you think that there is a trend that you use piece of university that you could use reality with a trust there? Using the simulator goals?
So, yeah. That's the way I think. Oh, the person kills crazy robot voices.
No, that is a really, really good question. And I think it's a question that we're thinking about all the time. But I think, there are two things here. The first is when we kind of envision how these voices are like this, how these voices will be used and how users will use them, right? And I think that to us, that's a big challenge. I think for us, we envision that we're using these voices on existing text. So what I mean is, you're a newsroom who's done a story on something that happened in Kenya, right? So a small newsroom, you've done a story. The bulk of the work is text-based. And you're then trying to create a version of that story for your audience to kind of just deepen media engagement. Now, you have two options, right? Your option is, okay, let's hire someone to record the voice. It's going to take, there might be errors, going back and forth, fixing that. And so it was going to take you time, it's going to be more expensive. And so you go the route of using the voice that we generated. But the key thing there is, number one, it's stated boldly, this was developed using AI, meaning etc. But the bulk of the work, the original work, is the long form content. What we're not envisioning meaning being used as of yet for is original audio reporting, which is what radio does, and which is what I think is the duty of radio. We're not trying to replicate, or rather, we're not trying to replace the work that radio does. We're trying to make text work more accessible. But I think you've raised a very, very important question, because if you're looking at this product down the line and someone then decides to make the podcast using entirely in artificial voices, that presents a challenge that we still need to think about. But I think that right now, what we've envisioned this product being, or this tool being used for, is as a kind of enrichment tool to original long form, ideally, reporting that is in text, and not as a replacement or an alternative to radio.
Time for one more quick one.
Hi, Roman. Well, I wanted to ask what we should do, what are the challenges and the risk. Most of us are building products for workflows based on licenses as GPT license, ChatGPT license that cost like €30 per month, and that's okay. But we are relying our dependency on that tools that we currently know that they will rise prices in the future. And it's really close because we all have been waiting. AI model, business model, it's not working. It's really cheap and it's really expensive to keep care of this. How we should approach this on all of us developing things that are not ours at the end. We are just having ideas, but we are depending on the big tech platforms again.
That's a great question. Straightforward tech dependency on particular tools.
I just think that we shouldn't make the same mistake that we made with the traffic trend. Definitely. We just know how that story went, and we shouldn't have another chapter of that, because then that will do it for us. We should be a lot smarter about that. It's always tougher to choose the sovereign path, but I really think to start thinking and working towards building homegrown or regional infrastructures for us as well. Democratize tech, but truly.
That's a very difficult question. Our organization just last week applied for our ChatGPT for NGOs, and luckily we got it. So we do have dependence ourselves as well. But the way I think about it is, we don't have to use AI in everything just because it's cool, right? Only where there is repetitive tasks, like only where we think we can increase our efficiency and productivity, and probably we could limit the use of AI from unnecessary things. Probably like when we're increasing efficiency and productivity by 30%, then we probably choose to use AI that process. So the second thing I was also thinking about it is Maloya doesn't have like its own language model, and ours is, there's this other generative AI platform called Igune AI, which was, we always have to use the basis of the technology of foreign organizations, because like for 2026 budget, our government is planning to buy 4 GPUs with hopes to buy 60 more in the next few years. If you think about it, like the other platforms, they have like 20,000 GPUs, 80,000 GPUs to develop their models, and our country is budgeting for 4. So that is really something that I think about a lot, this dependency on foreign platforms. If they somehow shut down or anything like that, as a country, we don't have anything. But there is still like smaller ones that we can choose. Like there's this other platform called Baatar.ai that helps to optimize workflows and things like that. So there are options in your country that your national developers are building. Maybe you could look into those to be more sustainable, I guess. Yeah. I mean, it's more of a non-answer.
Beckett?
Sure. That is a really, it's a fantastic question to ask, because I think for us, the way that we look at it is you're almost confronted with thinking about the lesser of two evils. And on the one hand, you have, yes, international or foreign-owned platforms, which then starts to bring up debates around, at least in our own side of the world, around things like just so colonialism, how are we making sure that, there's some sort of sovereignty there. But on the other hand, and I think sometimes what excites me about Nigeria is that we're very, very, I guess, open and pragmatic when it comes to AI. So for example, our Northern has the AI collective, they do a lot of work around thinking about use cases for AI and how the government can back AI a bit more. But we don't also have the most reliable, right? So sometimes, so it's also like, to what extent are we exposing ourselves to surveillance? To what extent is this going to become a tool to further someone's political ambition? And of course, journalists don't always have the best relationships, with the government. So I think for us, what is, again, just bringing us back to is how, as an industry, we really need, number one, we can't avoid talking about AI. We can't avoid taking some sort of control over our own kind of AI destinies. But at the same time, I think we have to also be thinking about collective, collective ownership that just is more grounded within the industry and is not government dependent, but also not too private sector dependent. Because again, nobody is thinking about ethics, I think, the way that journalists have to. And it's a very, very, key strength that we have, and that I think is important now, I think even more than ever. Yeah.
Very good note to end on. Just to let you know that there are articles about the project, these 3 projects on the JournalismAI website. It's the LSE JournalismAI website. And loads of other information about the other projects and loads of other resources, which is all free for you to use. I hope that you've been as inspired as I've been by these 3 people over the last year, and I wish you all the best of luck and look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you very much, Ray.